Hello, it's Pete back again with another review. Today I am looking at Star Trek Beyond. It's been out a couple of weeks now, but I've only just got a chance to see it, so I'm giving my review for it now. Star Trek Beyond is the third movie in the new rebooted JJ Abrahms version of Star Trek. A quick back story on me with Star Trek and the bias I have or not against this series of films in general. I'm not an old time Star Trek fan. I don't really ever really like the old Star Trek movies or the series. I have a lot of friends who are really into Star Trek and love it passionately. I never really got into it. I give it a casual watch, but I've never really been into it. A couple of the movies, First Contact was good, but I've not really properly ever really been into the old Star Trek. So when they rebooted it, I didn't really have a lot to be interested in or a lot to really lose, whatever it was like. And initially, I was hardly really bothered about it, but I did really like the J.J. Abrams rebooted Star Trek. I thought that it was really good, and I even liked the second one. But I do concede that while I really enjoyed those movies, there was a slight feeling from certain fans and certain people that it strayed quite far from what Star Trek originally was. And while I love the way it was, because I have no real connection to old Star Trek, I liked it how it was. I understand that for some people, that especially the last movie rubbed people up the wrong way, and they kind of felt that it wasn't a Star Trek movie, and J.J. Abrams was making it more like Star Wars, which for me, I enjoyed being more a fan of Star Wars than Star Trek anyway. But looking at it from the other perspective, I can understand certain Star Trek fans not being happy with the way it was going. So, jump to Star Trek Beyond, which is no longer JJ Abrams at the helm, but they went and got Justin Lin to direct it, who did Fast and Furious. And I felt that it was, to me, it sounded like the wrong choice, because what you really want to do with this movie, I felt, was to get it back on the side of the original Star Trek fans and to make it feel more like the old Star Trek. And it felt that that was not a good sort of director to do that, because he is an action director who did Fast and Furious. He doesn't really have a track record with more cerebral sci-fi, which is what Star Trek was always known for. So I would have felt that going with someone like Joe Cornish, who originally was on board to do it, would have been a better pick. But for whatever reason, that fell through. And then someone else was going to direct it. Robert Orkey was going to direct it, who wrote the other two, which seemed like a weird choice. And then he jumped ship from doing it. So in the end, it was Justin Lin and Simon Pegg writing it. So I was sort of cautiously optimistic, but the first trailer that dropped I really didn't like. In fact, I hated it with a passion. I thought it was awful. It made the film very terrible, and there wasn't a big marketing push for this movie like the other two. It felt like they dropped that trailer, and then they dropped another trailer only about a month or so ago, and the other trailer was a much better trailer. Like, I really enjoyed the second trailer. I was like, this looks like a totally different film. It just goes to show what a good or bad trailer can do for a movie, because I was really on board with it. I was like, this new trailer actually looks very good. It looks like it's more similar tone to the first two, but it also looks like it's a little bit more like old Star Trek to please the old fans. So I was a bit more optimistic going into it. So I finally got to see it yesterday after that massive preamble, just to give you my initial views on what Star Trek is. And I have to say, again, I really did enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I did think Justin Lin was a bad pick, but I think he actually made it work very well. I was quite surprised. And I think that maybe the credit does deserve to go to Simon Pegg for the writing, because I think he did manage to kind of incorporate the older Star Trek stuff that people like some of the techno-babble and some of the more cerebral aspects of Star Trek and conversations that were going on was more like in the vein of old Star Trek, but it still had these really thrilling action sequences that Justin Lin did very well, that continues the sort of the same universe as what J.J. Abrams did. Plus, the other thing is that's different from this Star Trek, that isn't quite as much of a slap in the face as, say, something like Ghostbusters is, because of the way that this reboot series has gone. They haven't erased the old movies, they still are something that happened. And there's a couple of scenes in this movie where they do pay homage to the original Star Trek crew and the original cast. Obviously, Leonard Nimoy, the original Spock, did pass away, and they do tribute him very nicely in this movie. So I like the fact that it isn't totally shutting those old fans out. There's a couple of moments that for old Star Trek fans, they will probably love it. For me, I don't have a big connection to old Star Trek, but I appreciate the fact that they're not shutting out the old fans and making them feel like it isn't a film series they can enjoy anymore. It was also really sad to see what's the name of the guy who just died? Anton Yelchin. Really sad to see him in this movie, because of course he died in a fatal accident about a month before the movie opened. So they don't really tribute him that much in the movie. Now I can imagine that in the next film, obviously him having died, they will tribute him very, very nicely, like they did with Leonard Nimoy in this, and it'll be a really sad moment. In this movie, it was just sad to see him because this is the last film you're going to see him in. I think there may be one other movie that's coming out with him in, but this is one of his last big movies he's going to ever be seen in. And of course, he had no idea this was going to be his last one when he did it. So he is in there in little bits and pieces, and it is quite sad to see him. But overall, I really, really dug this movie, even though I'm not an old Star Trek fan. For me, it was different enough that I still got a lot out of it. I think that the core of it is still very, very strong. It's still got a lot of good humour in it, which I thought worked very well. It's still really about the characters, and the characters are very interesting, and this is really the thing that got me glued into it. Even in the first two movies, is I love Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. He really does feel like a human being. He feels like a three-dimensional character you can relate to. I love his relationship with Spock, and all the way that they interact. Their relationship, the way it's set up, is brilliant, and it continues to be brilliant. And each move of it does progress the characters a bit more. They're not just doing the same things. Like, he's starting to become his own man. He's starting to kind of do the things that live up to the legacy of his father, and then get to the point where he's like, what do I do now, because I've sort of done that? Is this what I really want for myself or not? So he's dealing with emotional turmoil in this movie, and it's always good when there's internal character conflict going on before the film really kicks off. I expected it to be minute one, action, loads of crazy stuff happening, nothing really established, but it doesn't actually do that. It actually does take time to establish the character dynamics, establish what's happening with all the crew 2 and a bit years later from where you last saw them. And again, got to give a big shout out for Carl Urban as Bones McCoy. He was brilliant. Again, he's really, really good. He gets lots of good lines, and he really has got into that character and owns that character extremely well. And he does deliver the comedy well. In the trailer, it looked very, very forced, but in the movie, I think he just owns the character, and it's so great. And that the core trio of really Bones, Captain Kirk, and Spock are really what keep this movie going and make it very, very strong. There is a new character added into it, a new alien woman who I can't remember the name of for the life of me off the top of my head, but she was really good too. She was kind of like a kick-ass character. He was a good, strong female character who I liked that they're adding into it, and it looks like she'll be a character going forward in the movie as well. Again, she was added in like very late in the day. I think a few months ago they just added her whole character in, and that made it sound like, oh, this film's really in trouble when they're adding in a whole character months before the film's finished. Is it going to feel tacked on? Is it going to feel really weird? But if she's a character they added in, and I'm assuming that's who it was, she really did blend in very well with the movie, and they've done a really good job of writing it in a way that didn't feel like she was added in at the last minute. She felt very integral to the plot and had her own stuff going on and things like that, so she was really, really good. So performances all around were great. The action was actually very, very good. I saw some stuff with Kirk what looked like on a dirt bike, and I was like, that looks really out of place for a Star Trek film. That looks really stupid. But even within that, it does explain it. Like, it's a well-made film that it sets up the things before it. It shows you the bike. It shows you the reason why the bike's there. It have a whole bit where Kirk talks about it. So when he turns up on the bike later, it's not just a sudden like, where the hell did he get this bike from? It's just appeared to be part of a random action scene. It's actually embedded into the storytelling pretty well, and I think the whole film is like that. It does sort of set up things that are paid off very well later. Idris Elba as the bad guy was terrifying, and he was really good. His performance was great. I would have liked a little bit more from him. He did have a little bit of a typical villain role. I think that Benedict Cumberbatch with Carr managed to do a lot more because he got a bit more chance to actually explore his emotional side. And I felt that with this character, without giving a spoiler away, there was a chance to do that, but it didn't quite go into it in as much depth as I really would have liked. To really make you really see it from his point of view. I think in Into Darkness, I really loved how much I was actually won over to Khan's argument at one point when I was watching that movie, and I actually watched it at one point thinking, I actually see what he's getting at. He's actually a really good villain because you can empathise with him. Didn't quite get that with this guy, but he did still present a very good challenge. The movie did look fantastic. And it wasn't all set on one planet the whole time. It sort of jumped around a little bit more than that. So I thought it was going to be much more small scale than it was. It was quite a big scale, but then at the same time it knew that it was still focused around the characters. And it was a very well made movie. So overall, like, the direction was great, the acting was great, the script was really good. The only thing that really let it down was it still came off as somewhat something that you'd seen before. I think that it didn't really up the ante the way the other two did. Now, not that every movie needs to do that, but I feel that the reason why maybe it only seems to be really connecting with the Star Trek fans and not a bigger audience is, it is made for them, but the problem is you have to bridge that gap and bring in new people. and sometimes movies can do it well and sometimes they can't. And I don't really know why this hasn't hit with a bigger audience like the other two did, but it doesn't seem to have really done that. And I think it's because by and large it doesn't seem to really bring anything brand spanking new to the table. It does everything it does very, very well, but there's nothing very original that you haven't seen done here before. With the other two movies, they did have a bit more of an original feel to them, like they were bringing some Star Trek you hadn't seen before. This felt more like all very, very good, but nothing exceptionally new. And I think that's what the only thing that drags it down a little bit for me is just that aspect of it, really. But really, overall, I couldn't really fault it very much. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10, which is only a fraction lower than the first two. I still feel it comes in a little bit lower than the first two for me. It's ever so slightly not as enjoyable or not as engrossing as I got with the first two JJ Abrams ones. But the drop in quality is not very much. It's a slight drop rather than a huge drop. And for some people, this may even be better. Like, if you are a fan of the old Star Trek, I wouldn't mind betting that you prefer this to the other two, because it does pay more homage to the old crew, the old series and stuff, and it just does feel more like old Star Trek. And I suppose again that's part of the reason why for me it works slightly less, because those bits that were more like the techno babbly type bits, the kind of stuff I don't really like, why I don't get into Star Trek in the original first place. I was never a huge fan of it. It was those kind of things always took me out of it. But obviously, if it's what fans want, then it's good for them. But yeah, 8.5 out of 10. I'd say if you're a fan of old Star Trek, you probably like it. If you want just a decent action movie, it does work as a decent action movie as well, like the other two did. And if you enjoyed the last two J.J. Abrams movies, I can say that it's worth checking out, because it doesn't completely do something completely different. It's a good continuation. It's good to see all the characters back. The character dynamics are really strong. The character relationships are really good, and it does make me look forward to another one. I still want to watch another Star Trek, but I do start to wonder if they're going to start to become more sort of similar type movies. Like, they're not really going to have that wow factor that the first two did. But we'll see how it goes. It hasn't done amazingly well, so it could be that the next one has to tone down the effects and the budget anyway, because it had a huge budget and didn't manage to make it back. And the other thing is that, considering the budget it had, I don't really know why it cost that much to make it. I mean, I know that it did look fantastic, and there were certain shots where I was like, that looks really good, but I still don't quite know where like 185 million budget went watching that movie, because I'm like, some of the stuff is in one location, and some of the stuff is in space, but it wasn't such a huge movie that it needed that budget. I don't think. I think you could have done it for like half that. Really, you could have made it for a lot less, and it's still been just as good. I mean, some of the effects would have had to have been trimmed down a bit, but then you wouldn't have had to make such a huge return on it. Anyway, I'm going off topic here talking about that, but that's a subject for another video. But overall, I would say it's worth checking out. I really enjoyed it. Surprisingly enjoyed it, actually. Even though those negative trailers did put me off at first. So it just goes to show it's always worth checking out a film, making your mind up, and not going off what the trailers tell you. So yeah, check it out, 8.5 out of 10. So I will see you guys soon with yet another review. It will be Suicide Squad, I think, next, or Jason Bourne. Not sure what order I'll be able to watch those in, but those will be coming up very soon. So I'll speak to you guys very, very soon. See you later. Bye.